What if the biggest reason your startup fails has nothing to do with your idea and everything to do with what you assumed? Market validation isn't just a checkbox. It's the difference between building for the market and building in a vacuum. In this episode, we are joined by Amit P. Gandhi, founder and CEO of the Insight Tribe, a boutique healthcare consulting firm that helps medtech, AI health startups, and investors turn clarity into strategy. With leadership experience at GE Healthcare, Philips, and Deep Tek, and a master in leadership and strategy from London Business School, Amit brings a rare mix of corporate depth and entrepreneurial insight. In this podcast, Amit explains how market validation drives success, evidences replace assumptions, and credibility attracts capital. Catch the full conversation on the nxtHealth Commune channel. So first, let me explain you what exactly we are trying to do with Health Commune. We have two channels. One is a Health Commune, which is for where I invite doctors and we create health education. Second, what we have understood is like there is a big community who needs some kind of a great content, whether it's coming for doctors or experts, and we call it Next. So Health Commune Next. Now in the Next, we are trying to connect startups with medical experts, okay, whether they are doctors, healthcare experts, or people coming from the medical industry. I feel that that's the important communication gap we are trying to fill. Okay, and that's the reason I thought that with you, we should be speaking something about market validation. Okay, now I wanted to speak about early stage healthcare startup, but you said it's important for everyone. Okay,
Yes.
so let's probably focus on the early stage startup because they are those who need it, whether they have the budget or not. But then I think it is important for any startup who's at any stage, or if they are pivoting or trying to get more into more markets, probably that's also important, right? So I'll go with the definition, which I always believe that even definition should be clear, right? So what exactly is a market validation, according to you?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, thanks for having me here. And it's quite a pleasure to talk to the community and about this topic. It's quite passionate about this topic, actually. So in general, when you talk about market validation or insight-led, or what I call as market-backed approach to do anything, what broadly it means is really trying to understand what is the problem we are solving, what is the size of the problem, right? Can you get paid enough to solve the problem? Is the cost of solving the problem lesser than the benefit it generates, right? So really more detailed understanding of a business understanding of and the model understanding, as well as the problem statement understanding from the people for which you are trying to solve this. Understanding that is very important.
Correct.
And that's what really constitutes market validation. What happens is many a times you start with what technology can achieve. And that's great, that's important. In terms of, okay, a particular technology can solve this problem. I'll give you a great example, a simple example that anyone can relate. A chat GPT, for example, can write a wonderfully drafted email, especially when it came in. It can draft a wonderful email, but a very long one, right? With a lot of flowery stuff and send it to people. You are actually saving a lot of time. What's the advantage, what's the value proposition of this that people talk about is that, you solve this, you are saving a lot of your time.
Correct.
The one who is typing his time. And people say, oh, great, this is going to be a great productivity enhancer, which ChatGPT in general will be. But this particular example, the fun is, this is very technology forward. Are you really solving any problem for? And are you really gaining value overall in the process is something that you really have to think for, right? So you've thought about productivity gain, but have you really understood that there more time is being spent by all those who read it?
Correct.
Actually, because you're writing so much of stuff that was not necessary, right? Sometimes very simple response of even as rude as get lost is much more effective than writing it in a very nice and manner and making 100 lines out of it.
True.
Right? So you're actually saving your time.
Yeah,
But you're wasting far more number of people.
Yes.
So it's not only value neutral, it is value negative.
Correct.
Right? And I'm just giving this example to understand what problem you're solving and really not get carried away with tech forward approach. But that's where I say market backed approach, in the sense, are you understanding a particular problem to be solved? How important is the significance of the problem? And are you understanding in a systemic way? It's not about just, there are some problems which you might be solving, but they are not critical enough to be solved.
True.
Or even if they are critical enough, you might not have a way to solve them in a cost-effective manner, and the value for it might be much lesser to the people.
Correct.
So it's not a business model then that should be there. It's probably something that should be solved in some other way, right? And then also understanding holistically whether this problem can be solved in any other way by someone else in a far more effective model. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to build business, which needs to be at least sustainable to a certain while. And many of the folks don't do that. Right? And that's why market validation, when I say market validation, it encompasses all of this. It's not about just the size of the market, which is also very important, by the way. Which kind of gives you an idea how much this can be really scaled. But it's also about value proposition, who you are creating the value for. It's about, is the problem having so much pain that people will pay for it? Who realizes this? How many of those realizes this? All of that. Right?
Correct. But then if we look at, like, you're working exclusively for healthcare, I'm working for healthcare.
That's true.
And we are focused on all the problems like that healthcares are facing. Now, do you think that compared to the other industry, market validation is even more important for the healthcare startups? If so, why? Welcome to Health Commune, where we are shaping a healthier world by bridging the knowledge gap between people, doctors, and the healthcare industry, empowering better health for all.
So I wouldn't know whether to compare with all kinds of industry and say whether that's very difficult. I don't have the vast knowledge of all industries to compare it exactly. But in healthcare is definitely very important. That doesn't mean it's not important in other places. Of course, healthcare is something that is long term. Right? Impact is immense. More importantly, any change in healthcare is not as easy or reversible as in some other places. So, for example, if you get wrong in fashion, kya hi hoga, right? What will happen really if you get the trend understanding in fashion wrong? You make a product wrong, it's at max a commercial loss.
Correct.
Right? You're not going, and people will quickly change. If they see this not working, will quickly change. But a doctor and the clinical practitioners and nursing and those who deliver healthcare are not going to change something so quickly.
Correct.
Because they're accountable for a life.
True.
And hence it's automatically regulated more.
Yes.
So because of regulation and because of the delivery difficulties, people are going to make a substantial change when they are convinced that this is substantially important and have a high impact. And that's very important, actually. It's a very good question in a way, because that's very important in healthcare, is to understand if the change is very minor and even if it is beneficial, its adoption is not going to be easy.
True.
Because the people who actually deliver it, for them, it might not make sense.
So even if we say that, in healthcare, it becomes important because of the pure nature of the healthcare ecosystem that works. But then we see that the established organizations, you were working with GE, all the larger organizations, they by default do market validation for every idea they want to get it into the market, which becomes really difficult for the startup community. Okay, so how actually it is happening in the larger organization, and what are the best practices that newer companies can learn from them?
No, excellent. First of all, you'll be surprised to know that not all larger organizations within at least India go through a systematic market validation. Right? A lot of them do, of course, but not all do. So it's a combination of a couple of things. I think it's a combination of what is at stake versus also, to an extent, I think the habits and the mindset of each country and region in terms of the way they approach innovation. if you look at US and Western economies, especially, who understand there's a lot more at stake, because when they make something, and they also are at the front end of innovation till now in the recent history. They understand the significance of market validation in a systematic one, not just, kind of understanding that. And they have the resources to do that. So
Correct.
it's easier for them to do that. And all of them, like almost all of them, if you look at in US, even a smaller company will do market validation. But having said that, in bigger companies, in India as well, a lot of them do market validation. As the stake has become important, decision making has become more complex, they want to do that. For that matter, in GE, I started the market validation function in GE Healthcare. So I was leading that function. I started it. So it was not, before that, it was not doing a very systematic market validation. To a large extent, one of the reasons is also because the products, a lot of them were designed for some other market, and market validation used to happen in those markets.
Okay.
By the teams in the headquarters. And when they came in India, it was just sold. So the main function of most of the Indian businesses historically has been to just sell it rather than make a product.
Correct.
Right. Now, I'm not saying only to sell, you don't need to validate anything. But because the stakes are lesser, you only anyway have what you have. You are not making those changes. But now, as things are changing, there's a lot of make in India happening. The size of the market has become bigger. The people are realizing the importance of market validation, and especially bigger companies do market validation. They have a separate function, expertise, relationships and networks, so that insights come in. Not only are they these insights are extremely useful if you use them for making decisions.
Correct.
And it's not that it's automatic. This really has to be filtered, right? It's like crude oil, from crude oil to create petrol and then create an engine that works on that petrol is that kind of a process.
Correct.
So getting raw data, understanding it in a manner which is insightful, and then understanding how that should be built in our strategy and then make something out of it it's quite a process. There are many people that has to do that in a systematic manner, and people underestimate the importance of this because it's all soft. It's not seen as a hardcore thing, right? And hence people are more working on getting an investment rather than getting insights.
Correct.
And then figuring out, okay, what we need to do.
True.
Which I think is a very flawed model. Right? It's a very dangerous model as well from a value creation perspective. People, when they get more insights, and are they able to understand and convert that into products, your need for investment is actually lesser in the first place.
True.
Because you know what you're doing. So a lot of that, going back to your question, a lot of that happens in the bigger companies because as I said, stakes are more. They have functions and expertise and they do it. But having said that, doesn't mean all do it and all do it well. Not really, but they have a lot of them. In Indian startups, going back, this is really being seen. It's very, very rare. It's very rare that an Indian startup is going through a route of completely understanding market, and some of it is very understandable. I think it's because the resources to do that is always not there. Many a times the founders assume, sometimes they're right, but not always, in that they will find it, they will understand, and that's enough. So some give itself less importance to market insights and are more confident about building technology. Right, because that might be their strength, and we kind of tend to rely on our strengths more, and we say, okay, we'll build a great technology, and underestimate the importance of market validation. Some understand, they do understand the importance of market validation, but they underestimate the importance of the way it is to be done. They underestimate the importance of the expertise required to make that crude oil to a working one, right? And that you need professional help to do that. The tendency to not do that many a times is primarily because it needs fund, and people think, I'll find out. I'm smart, I should find out. And at times they're right. But the bigger the problem they're trying to solve, the more complex the problem they're trying to solve, they might be underestimating the importance of it.
Like listening to you, I'm thinking about the 3 scenarios, which I have seen it so closely, can't take the names, of course. One scenario is where it's called the Indian Jugaad market validation, where you build something, then those 10 doctors. Okay, you go talk to them, and these doctors will like, I went and talked with these 15 doctors. All of them were ready to buy, say, all of them were said that my product is good.
Yeah.
Okay, before even working on it, building on it. And this is very common. I see so many people, they'll just go and ask 10, 15 doctors, and they call it like market validation. Right. Other thing I have seen is, I'm so inspired, so motivated, so driven, and I like it so much, and I so much believe it, I don't even listen. If somebody is telling me that it's not going to work, I can't even listen to it, right? I can't even make sense of that probably I have to see it, a step back and see because younger generation entrepreneur, I see them so motivated, so inspired to solve the problem. And that point of time, it's just like everything is like black to them. They're just so focused. Okay. Third scenario that I have seen is, I was running a successful tech company. We did from this to this and something properly, telecom, anything they said. Okay, these are not healthcare people. They are successful business owners in some other scenario. May raise funds, may not raise funds. Then they say that healthcare is something. Everything is fascinating in healthcare, right? Like, oh, you're saving lives. You're like, it's like a God syndrome kind of a thing. Then they come to the healthcare. And just with the confidence that I have done something else better, I can just replicate that model over here, right? And this, I've seen it so commonly in Indian startups. I've worked mostly with the Indian startups, so I know only India. Do you think like these are, or what are your myths that you have seen that the startups owner that they have in terms of market validation, and what are their belief system?
Oh yeah, very, very similar. All kinds exist.
Yeah.
I think all kinds exist. Belief is not only about young entrepreneurs having that. Might be they have more of not knowing what it takes to build a business, but all kinds. I've seen in all age groups when people become entrepreneurs. See, it's good to be confident. I think entrepreneurs need an extra sense of confidence to just sustain the difficulties in which they go through. So you need that more optimism and ability to kind of sometimes neglect those things which might be true, but still just get through them to be on the other side. But at the same time, I think it's very important. Lot of stuff that happens in what you are trying to say, right? One of the things I've seen as a lot of quality in, or a non-essential quality in founders, which is common denominator, is that because founders, most of them, good ones, forget bad ones, but good ones are very good learners, right? They're very quick learners. I think they have vast interest and they're very good learners. But sometimes because of that habit, they think they will learn everything on their own. They have, a lot of founders I've typically seen, don't know that they don't know. They don't have the kind of attitude to see whether I really don't know about this and can I give that to someone else, or do I need to be in control of every single thing that I do. A part of that helps them somewhere else. I think they over rely on that and not take that help. So for example, tech founders, and a lot of them are tech founders in healthcare, right? Either tech or clinical founders. So if you look at the Indian healthcare system, right, and you were talking about earlier about the startup scenario in India, most of the startups in healthcare are either clinical guy coming in and a tech guy coming in, or both of them coming in, guy, girl, whatever.
Correct.
So they are immense knowledgeable from clinical aspect. They're immense knowledge from a tech aspect. But a lot of them underestimate the need to understand business. And they say, okay, वो तो बात की बात है, right? It's something that will emerge afterwards. We will see when it comes, and we'll learn. And most of the people in healthcare, fortunately, that's great. Both tech side people and clinical side people. If you look at their history, they're people who have been smart, who have cracked academics. Right, who are people known to be smart, so they consider themselves smart, which is great, and they are. But at the same time, what happens is they overdo on the clinical and tech side, and they really do not think again from a market backed side of understanding this. How will it get paid? And you would see a huge chunk of Indian healthcare startups in this category.
Correct.
Because that's where it starts.
Yeah.
Very rarely a business minded, commercially astute person goes and starts a startup in healthcare, for a simple reason that he or she cannot do much without these two people. But these two people can start without a business person.
Correct.
But that generally has a life in terms of understanding, and some get through it. I'm not saying you have to have. You will learn. You will have luck. You will have some, and you will run across. But what people, when they see these examples, what they miss generally is that a lot of things in life happen because of right things at right time. And one successful example that is very visible to you, there are hundreds of unsuccessful examples of those kind behind them, which you are not visible to. So just blindly following a story and doing that is risky. It's better to fall back on fundamental principles to do well, rather than falling on an interpretation of a successful story and just follow it.
True.
Right? So it's always good to understand the market, whether you are going to get paid, building the right network of tech, clinical and business people for whatever it needs to succeed, and then work through it.
Correct.
But Indian startups, a lot of them, actually a huge number of them are of those kinds which are tech and clinical led, which is a great start, but not always a great end.
Correct.
Right, so.
But then if we are talking about startups, specifically startups, we'll talk about established companies later probably. At what stage they should be doing market validation?
I hope. I know what stage when it is late.
Okay.
And I'll of course tell you what stage it should, but it's too late when the investor has started asking you, please do market validation. And that's when most of them start, to be honest.
True.
Because they say, oh, the investor is asking, I need money, let's give him some market insights. Right? And and then get investment.
Correct.
Right? And then they do some patches. There's no heart in it. They do it because it's a checklist from an investor to do it.
Correct.
Right? It's too late. I think it's too late when you do that. Of course, it's still a good beginning to do that.
If not this, something else you'll work.
Because still you are there in the game. But ideally, you should start once you have a broad idea of the problem that you want to solve. Or even you have a broad idea of the area in which you want to solve a problem. You should start doing market validation and research in a systematic manner. Doesn't always mean that you have to hire the topmost agency and spend crores doing it. No, I'm not saying that, right? But there are many ways in which you can do that along with taking help from others. But fundamentally, you have to respect that it is important. And second, you should have a readiness to part away some of. You can't do it free. You can't get things at free.
Correct.
Right? Doesn't necessarily have to be a McKinsey company that you hire for doing it. Yeah, that's fine. You do it at a scale. But there are many ways in which you can collaborate and find people to help you. But you should have a readiness to give them something for that. And that readiness comes from appreciation of the use of it, which in itself many times is lacking.
Correct. Have you observed that startups, especially slightly at a little advanced stage, not at the early stage, when they think about the go-to-marketing strategy for their product, that point of time, they ask the agencies to do some kind of a market research, not the market validation we're talking about. And they assume that this market research is going to help them to place a product correctly into the market, which is like the pseudo market validation that we are talking about, which happens at the GTM level. And people, they dedicatedly keep budget for go-to-marketing strategies. It's a large budget that goes at that stage of the business, but not at whether the product is been. And I think that day we were discussing, and I really like that. For me, I always think that for me, one statement, if it is answered well, then my market validation is really good. And if I'm confident about that answer, it's like who's going to pay? If I have built something, who's going to pay? I think that's what we were discussing that day. Is who's going to pay for your product. And in healthcare, it is very multi-layered, right?
Yeah.
Patient is already paying for different treatments and everything. So he's already overburdened with the cost of the treatment and everything. Doctors are already spent enough to be the doctors and reach over there, and then still they're like time and everything. Hospitals are already spending, and so who's going to pay for this particular solution? It's become the first question, right? Where I think also should start thinking that what I'm building, where it is going to take, and that question, if it is answered at an early stage, that will also solve quite a much of a problems, right?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, every geography has its own healthcare delivery system.
Correct.
Which is distinct, which is different. And it really decides how payment can happen. And accordingly, you have to really adjust and understand your go-to-market as well as sometimes even design of the product. Sometimes you can design something wrong if you have not understood the payment system of that particular country and the healthcare delivery system. And hence it's very important. Again, many a times when we do this, people are saying, okay, I will find answers. But many a times you need external help to ask the right questions.
True. Very true.
And if you miss some of those right questions, they come and haunt you afterwards. Right? So that's why it's very important to have this capability in the startup organization, whether it's external, internal, and that's why I'm such an advocate of that.
Correct.
In terms of doing that right from much earlier than all of that. I'm happy to hear that there are some of these firms, even at a go-to-market stage, want to do market research.
True.
Many a times when I hear them, it's not even that, right? Many of them say, okay, how can you help me do sales? Get me channel partners, get me people, design some communication to reach to them. The thing is damn good, easy, because that's what it's a function of money spent. And then we have already a product, they'll come to know about product and business will happen. Lot of them, again, it happens many a times that people think what they have understood very well, their target audience will understand it automatically. And that's human nature to an extent. It's not about founders or about entrepreneurs. We think we have understood so well, right, of something. If we tell them once, people will understand, wow, why is this for? I have made a product. If I tell them the benefits of that to the target audience will deliver automatically. It doesn't.
Correct.
Right? It doesn't, because people have very different worldviews, very different perceptions, different understanding and knowledge base, and it needs a certain kind of insights as well as marketing techniques to try out to see what is the right communication for the target audience. And hence, those agencies or whoever is doing that needs to be of those kind who understand how to do this, right? And that's what a founder or the founder's team should look at while expecting. And they should not assume that just one campaign will make it possible. So, you have to kind of build that risk, understanding time, learning time, and also selecting the right folks' time to make this happen. And is easier said than done.
Correct. But then if the startup, if they thought through, kept the dedicated budget for market validation, then it's a good story.
It's a good story.
Okay.
Yes.
What if they do not have budget, but they still believe that they should be doing the market validation? What are the DIY ways to do it?
It's unrealistic to say that you will not have any budget. If you have a budget for doing your product, then you should better have a budget to know what product to do and what should be there.
Correct.
So I think it's unrealistic to say that there is no budget. I understand not having a lot of budget, not having budget to hire the best of known agencies or big ones. Those no one has, to be honest. Very few startups can afford to kind of go and hire the McKinseys of the world. There are a lot of independent as well as boutique consulting firms, not a lot but few at least. Also, the way to do that is to engage this kind of people, or for that matter anyone that you think can help you in a manner, even if you have a friend who you think can help you and has the skills to do that, right? You can have them, but hire them.
Correct.
Pay. Right? People will not give the results to you just because, even if they intend to, they're a friend, they intend to do good, but it's different when you are accountable for it, if you're paid for it, right? And that's, I think, is important. It's important for them to also value it. I think its payment is not so much only for the friend. Friend might not need that money at all and still might do a great job. But if you have not paid it, you don't yourself take it seriously.
Correct. Huh.
And a lot of research is about conviction. When you have that data and insights and you've paid for it, you have immense conviction to make it happen. And a lot of things happen because you have the conviction to make it happen.
Correct.
The behavior in which you run after you have done insights is one of the biggest reasons for this success, actually. It's not those insights alone. Those might not be high quality.
Correct.
But just because you got convinced in them, many a times the energy that you put in making it happen is much higher. And it's also becomes a very easy way to communicate with different stakeholders of the organization. To communicate that this is why we are doing it. This is the insight. This is why we are doing it.
Correct.
And everyone comes to the board to make it happen. And that is a bigger reason to do market validation than insights alone.
True.
Right. So you have to have some budget, but DIY is, in terms of easier ways or low cost ways, is to get people who know this in your network, or look at boutique firms that can help you. You can have a model where you share, you give some money, but you share the outcome. The success outcome is a measure of success, and a fee based on outcomes as well. And there are some people who are ready to do that.
Okay.
So you are not putting all cash up front. You are having like a mix of... so there are different business models in which even the consulting firms operate to ensure that they can cater to startups. Not many do cater to startups for a simple reason: they don't get paid.
Correct.
But if the startup community and the founders make this change, I think a lot of models can happen.
Okay.
It's people coming together and making that happen is required. Startup is a newer world. Like India, startups have really emerged in the last 10 years, 15 years of many volume, right? Earlier, a startup was a business house, a son starting something. They not really a startups. But today there are many startups. And I think solutions for those startups have started emerging now.
Okay.
It's a very early stage in India as a startup world, and I think such solutions will develop more and more.
Correct.
Because you will see the volume of people needing the support, so the models will change in terms of payment delivery, and will become much more easier and affordable for startups to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, we are pretty young in terms of
We're
our
pretty
startup.
young, so we shouldn't punish ourselves too much on that. But we should work towards building that ecosystem,
Correct.
which enables which improves the success rate of startups in India, right?
Yes.
If you look at it, India has still not produced many startups in healthcare, at least, which are of any size and which are shaping something big. They are, not they're not, but very few.
Very few.
But I think it's doing well, and it needs more ecosystem players to kind of accelerate this, enable this, get more success out of it. And as founders start learning, and they're good learners, as I said, they will learn the fact that you need more collaboration, you need more help, you need more people. Those will start becoming available automatically, that things will mature and evolve.
Correct. You have worked with, you know the market very well. Can you give me one example of a startup who did the market validation and did really good? May not be exactly the name of the startup, but the methodology that they followed and what result they have observed. Or other way around is somebody who has not done and they could have done it, the result could have been better.
Yeah, the second category, there are many. So I can probably give you some examples of what can get wrong. So let me not give you an example of someone who obviously didn't do anything and failed. I mean, those are quite, but even good ones, right? Even people, so there is a startup where the founders are very experienced people, very good people and folks. It's not that they are closed-minded completely or something like that, but of course the tech background and the similar background that I talked about, right? So they created a product based on a very broad sense of what's right. They did it in a time when it was very, very the environment was very helpful. So getting money was easier. Their profiles helped them to get money also easier, as experienced folks and all of that. And they build a product. They build a decent product with not a complete clarity when they made it in which market they will play. Right? And as investors started coming in, and that was very investor friendly time, so they got an investment. And investors started coming, they started asking in terms of how will you do it, and then they started giving suggestions which market you should go in and things like that. This is very dangerous. Very dangerous, right? If you don't have answers, someone else will give you the answers. And those people might not know what should be done.
Correct.
And investor is that community. They want to help. And they ask. But they don't know that business. So if you take them as it is, it's very dangerous place to be in. Correct. And you take that as it is because they're investors. It's a it's a cycle which is dangerous to be in. And they said, okay, we will do FDA approval for this product. We will target US market. They have not spent time in understanding that market, but they get the FDA approval before that. Right? And they get it. So the product is good enough, they get the FDA approval, only to realize that the FDA approval that they got for a particular product and solution, if it was tweaked in different way, the product does the job, but it was tweaked in a different way, it would be adopted much more than otherwise. When they understood that market, started understanding that market, they realized that the US system is very legal liability driven. The US hospitals wanted this, but they said, I don't want this for productivity reasons for which you have made it. I want to highlight emergency because I have a liability to report emergency within 6 hours. That's the rule in US. So if you go to an US institute in a hospital, you have certain symptoms that you don't know, which can create emergency, which are life-threatening or whatever. If you have gone to the institute within 6 hours, if the institute has not detected that, the liability shifts to the institute.
Okay.
In US. So they want to highlight it. They want to know that this person's, say for example, X-ray is there or the CT is there or whatever, this had this problem, which can become a bigger problem. They want that to be highlighted by the software. The software has the ability to detect it, but it was not designed to highlight it. And FDA was not taken especially for that. Just imagine a startup has spent money on FDA approval, which costs about 300 to 400K, right? On something which they wish they had understood before, they could have done it differently and revenues would have come. For some startups, that's a nail in the coffin. Right?
Correct.
It's for some, they still struggle and survive. But it's a big setback. GE Healthcare loses this 300K, it still can come back very easy. It doesn't matter. A big MNC can make these mistakes. They make less of those because there's a lot of expertise already sitting inside. But they can afford actually. But they still do and understand market while a startup cannot. And that's the challenge, right?
Correct.
So that becomes very difficult. Only to realize that if this product was sold in Europe, there was a market for it because Europe healthcare system is driven by productivity and driven by late. The biggest challenge in most of the European countries is the healthcare is delivered too late. It's delivered free, it's delivered excellent, but it's too late. Right? So they want the waiting time to go down.
Correct.
And they have much more propensity to use this product than a US system. But then you have not gone for a CE approval.
Correct.
So see the total opportunity cost that the startup had to go through because of this mistake. And this mistake is fundamentally not understanding your market first before building the product. Right.
Like one of the case that I have seen, and it exactly happened what you said, that in not investor, but when people, they give the opinion what went wrong. So one of the company reached out to me and we were discussing about like being a co-founder or some kind of a collaboration. I was interested in project for sure. And so it's a beautiful model and it's an absolutely unmet need in the industry right now. The lens cut is such a successful venture. But for the pediatric age group, you cannot walk inside the Lenskart stores and get the specs for your child. Like my daughter, she wears specs from many years she's wearing. There you need an ophthalmologist. Now this whole gap is there, that even if there is a optometrist or ophthalmology, and can be solved with technology, right?
Yeah.
And if there is a center, there is a Lenskart with ophthalmology for pediatric population, okay? And this 5 ophthalmologists came together, the doctors came together, I won't say all the ophthalmologists, one of the most important person is ophthalmologist, and they were building a beautiful model, okay? And the market was ready. They were able to do it for 10-15 farmers. So there was a shopping shop concept. Okay. Amazing, brilliant. And I was the happiest person over there because I'm tracking this unmet need since many years that, okay, who's going to create the Lenskart for pediatric population with ophthalmologist, okay? So I was just like, okay, that's my hypothesis. Let's see who's going to do it. Okay. But then by the time the discussion happened, more people got involved. And I don't know for what joy, they converted the ophthalmology solution into a chronic disease solution. They added diabetes because the diabetes is a big market. They added cardiology, cardiology. And I was like, oh, you were solving such a perfect problem and the market is ready. And in 2025, you're like first in the market kind of for somebody. It was so perfect to me as a person who's probably observing. Okay, not done the market validation for sure, but I was observing. And I was so disappointed with that whole thing went into some other direction. Of course, that organization is not doing the way I thought it will do, because of whatever the reasons is. I'm not sure about it. But I can speak only that part of the story, which is relevant to today's topic, is agreed. When more people, they get involved, and that time, when you just simply believe in what needs to be done.
And that's the point. You're making a very excellent point to what I was earlier making, and I'll just tell you why this is so related when I say the conviction that drives the business. You're not distracted by this suggestions, which are, by the way, very well-intentioned suggestions. So you should be open to.
Yeah.
But you're not distracted, or you're better in selecting which ones to take in and which ones not. When at a fundamental level, you would have done the insight work strong enough to be convinced about the opportunity that you are driving. When you know the yes inside you, it's easier to say no to outside.
Yeah. Beautiful, no?
Right?
Yeah.
And that yes generation inside is the work that I'm talking about. Is why you need to do that initial part of strategic clarity and market insight and take support there rather than thinking who's the investor that I'll get behind. Right? You more spend time in getting the clarity about what you want to do and readiness to depart what you have from a resource perspective in the initial, then you have a bigger yes burning inside you, and then that person is likely to say, yeah, this is a big problem, might be chronic diabetes is a big problem, this is a big problem, but I know what I'm doing because of these reasons which are outside me. I found out systematically from people around that this is what problem I'm solving. This is how I'm going to get earned. I'm going to do this first, and then we can tackle chronic diabetes or other things. And because you have that conviction much better, and not just you, right? It's a very lonely journey. Let's understand, right? Again, I think we look at it only from a very functional aspect sometimes, but entrepreneur journey is basically human behavior journey, right? It's in a lonely journey. So when you are taking that lonely journey and you have so many people saying things, and you're natural to get distracted. But if you've done this, you've got supporters within the system. And any which ways you've got more convinced inside you of doing it.
True. So true.
Right? It doesn't remain just an idea that I believed in. It's an idea which is tested in many ways, and there are other believers who have come into place because of doing this. Then your conviction is much more, you feel far more support, you don't feel as lonely, and it's easy to say no. I think that's why it's so important.
Correct. And the similar kind of argument I do when I'm an allopathy doctor. I studied MBBS, MD in pharmacology. That too. Right. Whenever anybody talks about Ayurveda drug and they claim that this works, I neither prescribe or I say or I recommend or I do anything. I am very neutral in terms of anything that is not allopathy driven. Because here I know that these are the clinical trials we are going through, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, pharmacovigilance, everything. So whenever any discussion that happens, I say that if the drug is good, put it under clinical trial methodology. And if the drug is, OTC, people are already taking, do the market access study. Go evidence-based, do the randomized control trial, publish it if it is true good. No, but why do we need to? Because Ayurveda is since whatever the ages and this and that. So that argument goes very into the same direction every time. But what I always say is, see, if you take paracetamol, fever कम होगा, no matter what. चाहे वो जर्मन का इंसान हो, जर्मनी का इंसान हो, चाहे इंडियन हो, somebody from my hometown.
इफेक्ट थोड़ा बहुत इधर उधर होगा, but it will impact.
Fever कम होगा. You take the paracetamol, fever will go down, right? If it is a fever which is we are talking about, right? If there are like other things, that's a different. And that's science. Now you prove that, then I'll believe it. I'll start prescribing. I don't mind. But just give me the evidence that this works.
And that's again a great example you're giving from pharma. If you go back to the question that you asked me in terms of other industries, I know for sure pharma, for example, does a much more market validation exercise. And pharma is big, more successful. Why? Right?
Yeah.
And they understand the importance of this because they've evolved over a period. I'm sure healthcare and medtech will also go through that journey in this country. But even Indian pharma companies do much more market research and validation exercise than the non-pharma healthcare does.
True.
And the reason is because they've realized the importance of this over a period of time. And of course, they've become bigger and more successful. It's easier to do that. But at the same time, they've realized long back that without understanding that, it's very difficult.
Correct.
Right. And also this whole thing, right, the B2C notion. The B2C players understand this more quickly than B2B because of just the C being so fragmented. You don't feel you've understood the market. While B2B sometimes happens is, I've talked with 10 guys and I've got it right times. To an extent that is just true, that they have a better understanding of it. But what they don't realize is how they are asking, what all is being asked. And if the problem is complex enough, you need to go a little deeper.
Correct. And look at this beauty of this, right? Like it's nothing but if market validation at a very early stage, it's nothing but a market access. If you're going in B2B, if it is in B2B, if you're going and talking to 20 customers or 100, if it's statistically significant, they're already, if they believe 80% is a good study result, 50% of them believe you already have your customers ready before you go into the market, right? So that's such a good exercise to do if you look at it and do it in a very methodic way. Two questions came to my mind when you were explaining. Like in India, I don't know, is there any startup who's able to create something or organization, healthcare organization and cater to the other countries? Like pharma companies, we are able to do so. Biosimilars, biobetters, doing a great job in US, Europe market, everywhere. But if you look at the startup community, whether it is a medtech or devices or health tech companies, very few are able to establish themselves globally. So when we are doing the market validation for other countries, probably I'm doing great in India, but I want to get into European market. That point of time, how that needs to be done and what's your experience in considering such kind of studies?
Oh no, absolutely. As I said, right, in healthcare, geographies have different healthcare delivery system, have different clinical paths, right? There is, of course, thankfully, there is certain similarities because everywhere is a human body, which helps. But at the same time, there's very different in terms of the way healthcare is delivered, the decision making happens in each of the country, right? For example, in US, insurance is one of the biggest stakeholder. In India, you might not need to understand insurance very well to be successful in Indian market. Very different markets, right? And typically startups, in startup world, players who are doing AI work, especially are building AI products, the market many a times is essentially out of India because India is still developing in terms of AI adoption. And because most of the markets across the globe and the richer economies do not have AI as well, it's lucrative, at least at the face of it, to sell in those economies because the price realization and everything is much harder, much higher, sorry. But what is harder is to know those systems and the cost to know them. And many AI startups make that mistake of, I wouldn't say mistake exactly, but find it on a very hard way that's the case. They are generally attracted and build their business with the assumption that they will be able to sell outside the country. So you're expecting a different kind of volume and you put that kind of money in, but realizing that, oh God, I mean, selling it, just imagine, right? And the firm in US which is building a similar AI product, and you are building an AI product, and even if you assume your product is as good or even better than them, to go in US and sell needs a whole lot different kind of focus and energy and people and resources and understanding of the place than you can doing it here, right? And then the person who is doing it there, especially. Right? So the person with 98% of your product can be much more successful there. And you cannot underscore and under this importance. Many times they say the companies which are AI companies in India who say they are global, are very dangerous. Please tell them don't.
Correct.
Decide your focus and be there, right? But it is different for different things, right? This is more true for AI products because AI is in that range of industry. There are many other products which are more evolved. And if you look at medtech, most of the medtech products per se, India is producing very little that really goes to to the richer economies. It does, but not much. Mostly India is exposed to the African countries and Eastern Europe and places like that. And you need to understand those markets to do well in terms of how you are going to deliver. What's the risk of compliance? What's the healthcare delivery system there? Your chances of succeeding that route is much better if you have a reasonable understanding of that. Not necessarily very deep, but at least a reasonable understanding of that. And people do that. Some do that, some don't. But yeah, that's where India is right now, from medtech perspective, as well as healthcare. Even healthcare service delivery, if you see, there are some hospitals or some even centers, diagnostic centers, who have gone outside India, but that has been mostly in Middle East and Africa, where Indian communities are very strong, and that brand has importance in it as well, right? And the service delivery is more easier than getting in a very regulated place like US and Europe, right? But it changes based on what kind of things you are doing.
Correct.
So there is no one answer for this. It's more nuanced than that. Correct. But yeah, that's broadly the space in which
that's exactly what I was planning to ask next is, assume in a best case scenario, an organization truly believes the importance of market validation. Does it at the ideation stage, or at least when you are parallelly building the technology, so we can do some modification based on the inputs that are there? I'm not asking like one step at a time kind of things. Very difficult for entrepreneurs to think about that. If they have done it, market validation, how frequently they should be doing? What's the best practice according to you?
I think bigger market validation has to be done at business idea and product level validation, which is more substantial, right? Then probably you need to do smaller level. It's a continuous process, first of all, right? I think it is not a process which is a one-time activity. It shouldn't be. But this doesn't mean every 3 months you wake up and do market validation. That's not required as well, right?
Correct.
But what you need to do is, when you have problems, it's simple. If you have, as a founder, you should be honest enough to know what is I wish I knew. I always say make a bucket of I wish I knew. Many times when you don't know something, you try to attribute it to something and say, iske wajah se hai. Right? Which is very dangerous.
Correct.
You should know what you don't know. If you're honest in that, and if you have a bucket, if you make it I wish I knew bucket, and if that bucket gets reasonably full, and especially if not even full, the quality of the questions, there are some which are very critical decisions made which can be costly, which are generally irreversible or extremely costly, is better that you get validated.
Correct.
When does it generally happen? Now, this is general. This can be depending on each one. This can be different stages when this is the case. For an individual, it's a simple test. I wish I knew bucket. But when is most of this happen generally is when you are validating the product, the problem the business size, and before going to an investment. If you are going to commit yourself to this for next year as a founder full time, as well as you're going to raise funds even in future, but even not, if you're just coming, you need to kind of it's a good time to start the validation. Good time while designing the validation. Once that is done, I think it's good time to do a little lesser level validation, but from a go-to-market validation. Once you've done this a lot, you need to do less of other afterwards. So at that time, you can just try to understand more from a messaging perspective, a little more validation in terms of how you should communicate, which is more effective, right? Which is a much lesser resource validation than the strategic validation, if I say so. And then once you have reached that, then you only need when you are wanting to go in another geography or want to start another product line, then you need more validation. Otherwise you are good. Right?
And how much the factors, things keeps changing, right? I started the organization, it's going good. Competition is unbelievable. Somebody has a better budget, better connects, they'll be able to do much faster than what I'm doing hard work every day. Okay. Second is people are changing very fast. Like today, whatever, like take the example of fashion trends, right? Like every year something new keeps happening. And people, their belief system, everything keeps changing. Nobody thought like how everything will change after COVID. Nobody thought that, okay, how everything will change after ChatGPT. Last year it was not there, today it is there. Like it's my best buddy. Okay, like that, right? So these external factor, how much it'll impact anybody's decision making, especially the strategic decision making.
It does. So that's a great question. So you need to identify, for example, right, once in a while, what is the big change that has happened and how will it impact me? Right? You talked about 2 to 3 things. One, you talked about big external events, and then you also talked about competitive events, which is external but still like events. Now, competitive events, every single competition comes, you don't need to do a very major validation because you should trust the people that are working with you will have a great sense of dealing with that competition to an extent. But it starts becoming difficult, you need a small validation, 100%. So having a competitive understanding is very important. It's more tactical, I call it, and you need a lesser resource validation, but you need it. But what also you need, which most people, even bigger firms sometimes miss, is if a bigger event is happening under you which you're not able to recognize, what I say is to see around the corners, which is primarily the leader's responsibility, is what if something big happens that can impact you, like AI, is going to impact you, period. Every single one is going to impact you. It only will depend when and how and to what extent. And having some visibility around that and understanding that will be very crucial for everyone. If you are a big organization, right? I mean, I'm not saying Fortune 50, but even reasonably big organization, right? Like if you are a 300-bed hospital, for example. Not like very big, but 300-bed hospital, one hospital. And if you have no idea of what AI can do it, right, you are for a surprise and shock in life, right? If you're a chain of diagnostic centers, imaging centers, and you don't know what this is, you will get impacted by this. So having that outlook and understanding of how some major events can really change you and have impact which are outside your control, and knowing those impacts and having a point of view, even if it is incorrect. Even if you hire me and I build a AI impact view on you, right, and I might be top of the game and do a great job, the likelihood that it will be incorrect is very high. Because no one can predict how this changes will. But still it will be very important because you build a point of view and you know and start sensing the changes in the point of view that you have built. You just become much more aware of it and you are in a much better position to respond quickly to those changes as an organization. So in that sense, it's very important.
Correct. Like this is our second meeting and I'm already convinced for the new functionality that I'm planning to add in Health Commune, I should do the first market validation. I'm going to take your help with that. And you already told me I have to do the market validation, then only we are going to discuss about it. If somebody is listening to our podcast and if they have listened already for whatever we have discussed, no matter what stage they are at, if they are funded, if they are already having very good revenue with this thing, they'll listen, they will say that, okay, I should do it. And we talked about the budget. There is always a budget, okay, or there are ways to do it. If somebody is listening to our podcast today, what's your message to them in terms of their ideation level or anything? What's your message to the society, community?
Yeah, so things that I've said so far, right? I think don't underestimate just because it's soft. And I remember in my MBA days, right? And the CEO of GE made this comment which stayed with me, Jeff Meld. He said, when you do an MBA, the most important topics that you want to attend lectures for is finance and marketing. It's only when you become CXO you realize organizational behavior was the most important topic.
Okay.
Right. Similarly, because it's soft, it's not immediate.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think it's very important if you are an entrepreneur starting to build a business, it's easy to think of investment. It's easy to think about the product. But if you are not thinking about insights and the business model and how that's going to help you, what you need to do for that, you are going to realize it one day. It's better to be aware of it in advance and have the readiness to value it and make it done in the most cost-effective way. Fine, but do it like you would do a product. You are planning a budget for product.
Yeah.
You are planning a budget for investment.
Yeah.
Why or bringing people involved in technology as well as people resources? Why you are not planning for insights? Right? That means it's something that you don't think. These insights are going to make both of these functions effective, for which you are going to spend.
Correct.
So then why are you not taking more strategic help? And when I say insights, I don't mean just interviews or something like it. In general, support to make yourself more strategically stronger.
Correct.
I think that's one thing that I will definitely urge entrepreneurs to look at seriously and kind of find for themselves, not because I'm saying it, but find for themselves whether this is of use. Experiment with that as well, the same way that they experiment with many other ideas. Put something and find out what is useful.
Yeah.
You are not going to get the usefulness by not doing it at all or not investing in it. I think that's an angle which some of them should really look at.
Correct. And I love the whole concept, because in future, if God's grace, if I become investor and if somebody's pitching me and if they say that this is the market validation we have done when we were thinking about everything, then we went to the market, this is what we have done. And then we, before coming for the investment, this is what we have rechecked our findings, and it's more scientific, it's more evidence-based, it's more the way farmer person will probably, my kind of a farmer person will it's a language that I can understand.
Yeah.
And probably that's what like even investor would really enjoy, that kind of a story, than actually somebody who's just coming with the numbers.
Absolutely. Believe me, you will see the differences. I have attended so many startup pitches. I'm a member of Loyal VC, which is a VC firm. There's one more in one crowd, which is an AI fund, and there are a few others where I go. There is an INSEAD Angel Network and an INSEAD Alum. I attend a lot of the. You will see the difference. You will feel the difference. Some people don't know why it is, but they will feel the difference of a well-researched strategic deck versus something that is not.
Correct.
Right? You might not be able to find out exactly from it, but you will feel the difference when you have really, even if they don't mention that this is the work we did or studying, but you will see their conviction as well as the detailing of insights in terms of what they are. Even without understanding the subject matter, you will feel the difference as an investor. If that is, if you're listening and tuning in,
Correct.
You will feel the difference. Believe me.
At multiple stages, I'm convinced already.
Yeah.
Multiple stages. One is how I'm going to speak about this to startups that I talk to. Friends, those will reach out to me, Smita, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? Over there, whenever I reach out to startups, those who are actually coming over here for the podcast, for my own organization, for larger organizations, those who reach out to us by saying that I want to get into Indian market, as for my agency, those organizations and those who are thinking that, okay, we are doing good in this sector, we are able to probably create a good market for nutrition, well-being, other things. Now we want to get into probably devices, at that point of time, a well-established organization, but venturing something newer, those people also reach out to us, and I'm really, really convinced, and it happens rarely.
So you said something very interesting, right? You talked about market access. I'll give you a very interesting point on this. In my little experience in running this consulting firm, most of the work, right? Most of the work that I get is outside India, folks wanting to enter India for market access. Now it's funny. The reason I say is interesting and funny is while most of my network is India, right? Most of my network is India. So people in India know my expertise and I'm well networked and know about this firm far better. But most of the work I get is from outside firms. They might be referred from the same people. But it generally is referred from the same people actually. But they in India for their organizations will not hire. But because they don't have that function only. They don't know how to do it. But they will give reference, and the external ones wanting to enter India. I just finished a study for a pediatric firm wanting to enter India, for example. Market entry, they will, because they realize the importance of this. Most of the evolved economies, because they've gone through that phase, and they will do it, but India folks will not. And it's not that I've spent most of my career outside India, my network is there and that's why they no, it's just that they want to enter India, they want to do it in a systematic manner. So it's very interesting.
It's super interesting, and most importantly, I think that's what we have talked about this in our podcast, that we are still very young when it comes to startup. If podcasts like this will make people understand the importance of this, and imagine if there is a support system. We already have good incubator centers for development.
Yeah, it's already happening by the way.
Yeah, it's happening.
So there's a lot happening. There's incubators, there are accelerators, the government has given importance to Startup India. The kind of growth that has happened in the 8-10 years. So I don't even want to say that, though I might have been critical about it, the entire idea is to make us better. But the progress that we have done from a startup world is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. What we have done in last 10 years is only fuels optimism to the fact of what can happen in the next 10 years. And I think very rarely I say that a government has done great role, but I think government has done pretty decent role in at least pushing the startup agenda. There was a phase in life, I remember, if you are bright and you're doing well, if not from business house, but in general, non-business house doing well, people, and you start a startup, they will think, why he's not dumb to start? Like, he's good. Why is he starting? People will start startup when they don't have any other opportunity. And that was the way it was viewed. Now, thanks to all this ecosystem creations, which government have played a role, but even industry has, I read a note from one of the big, I think Vivek Paul had, the Wipro earlier CEO or someone, I don't remember who, but there's a beautiful sentence he said, if you are really so good enough as an individual, like as a professional, why are you not starting your own? That kind of cultural shift has happened now. That if you're really very good, you should be on your own. Kind of shift from a time where. So all of this, I think, is very important cultural difference, and it has happened because of a lot of this work done by corporates, in this government, and of course the people who are the investing community. The kind of investment that has come in India through the routes of VC and PE in all sectors has been very encouraging, right? So I think that's great. For us, we have actually arrived as a startup culture in India, and that's a big achievement in last 10 years. Now the time has come to improve the success rate. And improve and become substantial players on a global stage. These two things have not yet happened, right? And especially in areas like healthcare and innovation. We have done extremely well in consumer-related startups already, and I think we might even have some global examples. For that matter, many we have. But in healthcare, we have not reached that much, or even in product and medtech and innovation, we have not have that much. And I think this time has come that we will.
I think we are on the right track.
We are on track.
We are on track. It's just few more years probably.
No, it's a great time to be in healthcare in India.
Yes, it's a really good time. It's very fascinating, very very fascinating what's happening, and I'm fortunate I get to talk to startup owners, and I have like a ready dose of motivation every hour that whatever I discuss. But takeaway messages for me from today's, I think we made the point. I feel that this 1 hour I'm successful to explain that why market validation, especially in healthcare, is important, when to do, what to do, how to do. And even we talked about the hacks as well. And we really, really made the point. I'm really happy for what we have discussed today. Thanks, because of you have so many years of experience, right? You have seen the industry from the person who's going to give us the business, as well as now who you are a startup yourself, right? So you have seen the best part of all the world. And I really feel that, I'm looking for more startups to take your help, as well as work on more strategic way of whatever the approach they are taking.
I'm sure. Thank you so
for
much.
that,
Thanks
thank you
for
so
calling
much.
me. And
Thanks.
it was a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks.